Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer. All perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, maybe like never before. These highly trained warriors, operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement, caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position. But they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far, with capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have, and you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So We don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans. Right now, they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York, and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over, in particular, the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang, Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they call police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago, a little bit of a different kind of a threat, but we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6, 7 months. We used to have 2, on average 2 a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. But the gangs that they sent raped, tortured, and murdered American women and children. And they were sent by Maduro to terrorize our people, and now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives were so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst. They say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungari. What happened to her? They, as you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons a little bit more hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and sold American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country, considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries. And not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal. But we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Monroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine we sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first powerful way, in our home region. And our home region, our greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs they've made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power. And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist, Maduro, is finally gone in Venezuela. People are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation this morning. It's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Kane. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you explain how the U.S. will run Venezuela?
Alright guys, thank you so much for watching that video. If you're still here with me, that means that you just finished listening to President Donald Trump's speech. And honestly, that's one of those speeches you don't just scroll past. Whether you agree with him or not, whether you support him or criticize him, it's the kind of address that makes you pause and say, okay, that was a lot. So now let's talk about it, guys. I really want to know what was going through your mind as you were watching that. Because Trump didn't speak cautiously. He didn't hedge. He didn't soften his words. He spoke with certainty, especially when it came to his claims about Venezuela and the alleged capture of President Nicolás Maduro, which is no longer alleged because, President Donald Trump just confirmed that, Nicolás Maduro and the wife, Flores, were captured. Anyway, guys, That alone sets the tone, to be honest. What we just watched wasn't a rally speech. It wasn't off the cuff remarks. It was framed as a statement of action, of outcome, of something that, according to Trump, has already happened. And when a sitting US president speaks that way, people listen. Allies, adversaries, and everyday viewers at home also listen. Trump described what he said was a successful US military operation carried out in Caracas. He spoke about speed, control, and decisiveness. He spoke as though this was the closing chapter of a long conflict that many administrations before him, in his view, failed to resolve. Now, here's where things get interesting. As you are listening, you probably noticed that Trump spoke with total confidence. But he did not slow down to walk the audience through verifications, confirmations, or international response. He spoke as if the facts were settled, as if the world simply needed to catch up. And that raises questions. Not hostile questions, not disrespectful ones, but necessary ones. Because in global politics, words don't just describe reality. Sometimes they attempt to shape it. Trump framed Nicolás Maduro not primarily as a fellow head of state, but as a criminal figure. Someone he says posed a threat not just to Venezuela, but beyond its borders. That framing matters, guys. It changes how listeners emotionally process what they are hearing. It turns foreign policy into something closer to law enforcement, and it invites a very different kind of public reaction. While you were watching, you may have felt a sense of finality in Trump's tone. He spoke as though something dangerous had been removed, as though a line had been crossed and firmly redrawn. He didn't suggest a negotiation. He didn't suggest uncertainty. He suggested a resolution. But here's the thing, and this is where we slow down. In real-world geopolitics, resolution is rarely that clean, and that doesn't mean Trump is wrong. It means the situation is bigger than a single speech, no matter how powerful that speech was. Another thing worth thinking about is what Trump did not spend time on. He didn't dwell on how other countries might respond. He didn't address international law directly. He didn't acknowledge potential diplomatic fallout. That absence doesn't automatically mean those things don't exist, but it does mean the audience is being asked to focus on strength, not process. And strength, rhetorically, is something Trump understands very well. If you're someone who supports Trump, you might have watched that video and felt reassured, like finally someone is acting decisively. If you're someone who doesn't support him, you might have felt uneasy, not necessarily because of what he said, but because of how confidently he said it. Both reactions are valid. What's important is recognizing that a speech like this is not just about Venezuela. It's about how power is represented. It's about how authority is communicated. And it's about how much weight words carry when they come from the Oval Office. Something else I want you to think about is timing. This speech didn't happen in a vacuum. It came at a moment when global tensions are already high, when trust in institutions is fragile, and when information moves faster than confirmations. In that environment, a single statement can dominate the narrative before facts are finally settled. And again, that doesn't make the statement meaningless. It makes it powerful. Trump spoke as though this was a warning not just to Venezuela, but to anyone watching. He invoked long-standing ideas about American influence in the Western Hemisphere, and he spoke as if those ideas were no longer theoretical, but active. That's why this moment matters. Because even if you strip away politics, even if you strip away personality, what we are left with is this: a sitting US president publicly asserting decisive action against another country's leader. That alone deserves careful attention. So before we rush to conclusions, positive or negative, the smartest thing we can do is pause and ask, what follows from here? What confirmations appear? What reactions emerge? And how does this speech fit into the broader pattern of how power is being exercised and communicated today? And guys, I want to dig deeper into why the reactions and in some cases the silence around this speech are just as telling as the speech itself, because sometimes what isn't said speaks just as loudly as what is. But first, I really want to hear from you. As you watched Trump's speech, what stood out the most? Was it the confidence, the claims themselves, or the fact that he spoke as though this chapter was already closed? Let's talk about it. And this is where things start to get even more interesting, because once the speech ended and the camera cut away, the real conversation actually began, not just online, but quietly among analysts, journalists, diplomats, and people who understand how those moments actually unfold. Because when something this serious is claimed, the aftermath normally follows a very predictable patterns: statements, confirmations, counter-statements, emergency meeting, leaks, briefing, movements, name it. And yet, what followed this speech was measured in some places silence. Now, silence doesn't automatically mean denial. It doesn't automatically mean something didn't happen. But in international politics, silence is rarely accidental. It often means people are choosing their words very carefully or waiting for more clarity before speaking. What President Trump did in that speech was assert control over the narrative before anyone else could shape it. He didn't leave room for interpretation. He didn't say allegedly or we believe. He spoke as though the outcome was settled, as though history had already turned the page. That kind of certainty does something psychologically. It forces everyone else into a reactive position. And this is something Trump has always been very skilled at, speaking with such finality that even disagreements end up orbiting around his framing. But here's the question many people are quietly asking: was this speech meant to inform the public or to signal something beyond the public? Because speeches like this aren't just for voters. They are for allies, they are for adversaries, they are for people who read between the lines. When Trump spoke about Venezuela, he wasn't just talking about one country. He was talking about boundaries, influence, reach. He was reminding the world that the United States still sees the Western Hemisphere as strategically significant and that it's willing, at least rhetorically, to act decisively within it. Another thing worth paying attention to is how Trump positioned himself in relation to past administrations. He implied that this situation was allowed to fester because others hesitated, negotiated, or delayed. In contrast, he presented himself as someone who acts. That contrast isn't accidental. It's part of broader message about leadership style, one that values decisiveness over consensus, speed over diplomacy. Now, depending on how your worldview, that can feel. Sorry, guys. Now, depending on your worldview, that can feel reassuring or unsettling. What complicates this moment even more is how quickly information spreads today. A speech can go viral in minutes, clips can circulate without context, headline can exaggerate or oversimplify. And before official confirmations even surface, public opinion begins to harden. That's why a moment like this require discipline from viewers. It's okay to acknowledge the weight of what was said without immediately locking into belief or disbelief. It's okay to say this is serious and I want to see how it unfolds. Another layer to this is how Trump spoke about consequences. He didn't just describe an action, he implied deterrence. He spoke as though this was a message to anyone else considering challenging US authority in the region. That kind of messaging isn't just about today, it's about tomorrow. But history tells us that power communicated through words still has to be sustained by reality. And reality has a way of revealing itself over time through confirmations, contradictions, or clarifications. What's also notable is how Trump avoided emotional language when discussing the operation itself. There was no celebration, no gloating. The tone was controlled, almost procedural. That choice makes the claims feel more serious, more official, and that's likely intentional. Because when leaders speak calmly about extreme actions, it can make them sound normal, routine, expected. And that's something we should always be aware of as listeners. As viewers, our role isn't to panic, idolize, or dismiss. It's to listen carefully, track developments, and remain grounded in verified information as it becomes available. Right now, what we have is a speech that asserts power, signals intent, and reshapes conversation, regardless of where the facts untimely land. And that alone makes it significant. So, as we wait to see what comes next, whether confirmation, denial, or clarifications, the smartest posture is attentiveness. Watch who speaks, watch who doesn't, watch what language changes, and what remain firm. Because in global politics, moments like these are rarely isolated. They're usually part of larger patterns that only becomes clear in hindsight. I'll leave you with these. Whether you support President Trump or oppose him, whether you believe every word of that speech or remain skeptical, one thing is undeniable. Statements like these shape the world we live in. They influence markets, alliances, and public perception. And that's why it's important to slow down, think critically, and stay informed. I really want to hear your thoughts after watching, Trump's speech and not reflect I really want to hear your thoughts after watching Trump's speech and now reflecting on it. Do you think this was a turning point or a strategic declaration meant to project strength? Do you believe this changes the situation in Venezuela or mainly the conversation around it? Let's talk in the comments section. That's all for now, guys. I'll update you with more news. Please go ahead in the comment section and tell me, what do you all think about the capture of Venezuela president together with his wife, and what message do you have for the US Army that was able to do that work? And to President Trump, what would you tell him? Because a lot of people are feeling like he has been so good with trying to, stabilize other countries by, removing those who threaten those countries from growing, and guys, one thing about Trump is that he's always bold no matter what people say. That's an observation that I have really made. And let's continue keeping ourselves updated with what's happening, because I'll be updating you more about what's happening regarding this whole story of the capture of Venezuela's president. And guys, I can't wait to see who takes over after him. because as for now, the US government is, taking over Venezuela, until things cool down, and they want a peaceful, transition, and wow. I cannot just wait to see who is going to be the next president of Venezuela. But for now, we should all watch, and we should all watch, on our televisions and also on social media platforms and see what is actually happening in Venezuela. And a lot of people right now, like I would say that a lot of eyes are on what's happening in Venezuela, because I'm very sure that some people would want to take over after their president was captured, but the US said that that is not just going to happen without a process, and that is why they decided to stand in and take over before the next president is elected and chosen. And wow, guys, I just can't wait to see everything that unfolds. Let's meet in the next one. I love you all, and may God bless you.